Hey, Anja here for tabletblog.de. I've got the Microsoft Surface 3 in front of me that I unboxed about a week ago. And by now the tablet from Microsoft is available in most countries in the United States, most countries in Europe, and most countries in Asia actually as well. Yeah, and in this video we want to compare the Surface 3 to the iPad Air from Apple. So we have basically a classical old comparison between Microsoft and Apple. This is the iPad Air 1 now, but everything I'm saying basically goes for the iPad Air 2 as well, because the differences between those versions is not that big. Let's start a little bit with the hardware, with the displays. The Surface 3 has a 10.8-inch display that has a Full HD resolution with 1920 by 1280, while the iPad Air, of course, has a 9.7-inch display, as all iPads, with a Retina resolution. So the pixel density on the iPad Air is a little bit bigger on the Surface 3, but actually if you compare both displays next to each other, the differences are not that big. You don't really see a difference since Full HD is completely fine on the 10.8-inch device. The brightness is good on both tablets, as well as the viewing angles. I'm shooting this video outside right now, and I'm not sure how much you can see in the video, but I think you can see a little bit on both displays. So yeah, both displays are very, very good. There are a lot of tablets where you wouldn't see anything out here, even in the shadows. To the internal hardware, it's not that important. Of course, we have Apple's own chipset inside the iPad Air, while we have an Intel Atom quad-core chip in the Surface 3. It's hard to compare the rest of the internal hardware because we have an ARM platform with iOS here, while we have an x86 platform with Windows 8.1, of course, on the Surface 3. So it's hard to compare those two. The fact is, Windows 8.1 runs smoothly on the Surface 3, while iOS runs smoothly on the iPad Air, of course. So that's basically what we need to know. It makes no sense to compare everything else. Maybe the storage options. The Surface 3 starts with 64 GB of internal storage and can go up to 128 GB of internal storage, while the iPad Air starts at 16 GB, of course, and goes up to 128 GB as well, but that version is pretty expensive. So if you compare the 64 GB version of the Surface 3 to the 64 GB version of the iPad Air, then actually the Surface 3 is a little bit less expensive. Yeah, then let's continue our comparison. That's the internal hardware. It shouldn't be that interesting to compare, as I said, because both tablets run smoothly with its hardware, with its platform. Before we go any further, let me say one thing. If you don't plan to get the Surface 3 with the type cover, or at least with the stylus, then please choose the iPad, because in my opinion, as a standalone tablet, the iPad is a little bit better. You have way more apps, and it's much more compact to view movies, to read ebooks, to just surf the internet, to play a couple of games. For that purposes, in my opinion, the iPad Air is the better tablet because it is more compact and does not have as many features as the Surface 3. It's way thinner, by the way, as you might see here. And yeah, it's just, as a standalone tablet, the iPad Air, in my opinion, is a better choice. But if you want to work on the tablet, really work on the tablet, maybe you need a full-size USB port, you need a micro SD card slot, and then the Surface 3 is much more interesting. There are a couple of reasons for it. Of course, we have on the iPad Air, we have Microsoft Office, we even have Lightroom and Photoshop, but that are only the mobile apps. On the Surface 3, on the other hand, you can run full desktop apps. We have tablet apps here as well. The Internet Explorer exists as a tablet app. We have Skype as a tablet app. We have Line as a tablet app. Flipboard. A lot of apps actually that we have on the iPad Air as well. Not as many, of course, especially concerning games and newer trendy apps. But we have those on the Surface 3. What we don't have on the iPad Air that exists on the Surface 3 are desktop apps, and that's quite important if you choose to buy a tablet. So you have to decide what you want to do with a tablet. Do you just want to use mobile versions of the apps of Office, of Lightroom, that are by far not as powerful as the desktop apps that the Surface 3 provides? I have a full version of Lightroom running on here. It's the full desktop version of Lightroom. We have every feature of Lightroom that you can use on a standard desktop PC, on a high-end laptop or Ultrabook. It may not run as smoothly, especially with bigger file sizes because of the memory limits of 2 GB or 4 GB depending on the version, but it runs. The same goes for Microsoft Office. You can run a full version of Microsoft Office on the Surface 3, which is simply not possible on the iPad Air. You have Office on the iPad Air and it is for free, but you don't have the full version with all the capabilities that you might need, especially if you're using it for business and need it for work. That's the main difference, basically. You don't have a nice combination of the keyboard and tablet and kickstand with the iPad Air. There are solutions, of course. There are keyboard solutions for the iPad Air, but in my opinion, they're not as nice. The same goes for the stylus. You can get a stylus for the iPad Air. It's a capacitive one then, and it's not as precise and as integrated into the operating system, especially as with the iPad Air. You don't have handwriting recognition in every app on the iPad Air. Apple simply does not allow it, but you have it with the stylus, an active stylus on the Surface 3. So that's basically my comparison and what I have to say. The iPad Air as a tablet is, in my opinion, way better than the Surface 3 because of all the apps, because of the compact build, and yeah, that's the reason why the Surface 3 is better. If you want a tablet, but also a tablet to work on with a real keyboard, with real Office, with a real desktop where you might want to install Chrome, use all the extensions of Chrome, and so on. Okay, that's a quick comparison. If you have anything to add or wish me to try on both devices, please write me in the comments. Quickly to the battery test. I just ran a battery test on the Surface 3 yesterday night. I had a 720p video running, endless running, for a couple of hours, and the battery lasted on the Surface 3 for 8.5 hours on medium brightness, while the iPad Air runs way longer. It runs a little over 10 hours in reality when you're watching a video that's on the device, of course, not streaming video in both cases. So the battery life on the iPad Air is a little better, but the Surface 3, I'm actually surprised that it was 8.5 hours, because previous Surface devices sometimes had way worse battery life. Okay, this is the quick comparison. I'm Andrzej for tabletblog.de. Thanks for watching.